The Manila Electric Company, or Meralco, is an electric distribution company in the Philippines, operating in Metro Manila and surrounding provinces. At first glance, the word Meralco doesn't add up to its complete name. That's because Meralco is an acronym for its former name, the Manila Electric Railroad and Light Company, and the rail aspect of some of the previous functions of Meralco, in particular, the operation of an extensive tramway or streetcar network in Manila, or the Tranvia, as it was then called. But this transit network, once serving millions of people in the city, is now a distant memory and a relic of a bygone era in Philippine history. So what happened to the Tranvia? And were there any traces left of this once thriving transit network? For more in-depth commentary and a list of sources used in this video, check out the link in the description below to listen to the podcast episode where I dive deeper into this topic. The story of the Tranvia is the story of Manila's growth from its origins as a small fortified trading hub into a bustling metropolis in the heart of what remains of Spain's empire in Asia. At the start of the 19th century, the population of Manila was around 30,000, and farthest boundaries of the city back then were Tondo and Sampaloc in the north, Malate in the south, and Santa Ana and San Miguel in the east, where the future governor's palace, or Malacañang, will be located. Prior to this, most of the political and economic activity in the colony was concentrated in the walled city of Intramuros and the commercial districts of Binondo and Parian, currently the areas of Arroceros Park and Liwasang Bonifacio. And overseas trade was mostly conducted with the Chinese from Fujian province and the Manila galleons, in which they export their Asian goods in exchange for resources like gold and silver in Mexico. But outside events would soon change the social fabric of the colony, with the Industrial Revolution in Europe and the United States, the end of the galleon trade owing to the independence of Latin American countries from Spain, and the opening of the Suez Canal in Egypt, which brought new economic opportunities in the region. As more goods and services entered the city, Manila, with its poorly paved streets, wasn't able to catch up, as public infrastructure was mostly neglected by the colonial government, who did very little to fix the problem. The population of the city has also grown 5 times in a couple of decades, as more people from far-flung areas enter the city in search of better opportunities. As an archipelagic colony of Spain, the primary modes of transport were sea and river vessels, widely utilized along the rivers and estuaries around Manila. On land, travel relied on animal-powered wagons, including horse-drawn carriages as seen in these photos at Luna Park, and the iconic calesas that were frequently roaming around the city. However, these vehicles often faced challenges from the humid tropical climate and frequent typhoons and monsoon rains, which left roads muddy and difficult to traverse. This does not include the fact that private coaches cause enormous congestion in the more active and busy parts of the city, where one street can have around 5,000 to 8,000 carriages passing through. Economic reformers like Gregorio Santiago described the difficulties of farmers selling their goods due to the lack of transportation facilities. He pointed out that despite the increase in taxes, nothing has been done to improve the public infrastructure of the islands. Calls for better infrastructure and transit development go as far back as 1864, especially by British capitalists residing in the Philippines such as Nicholas Loney, but to no avail. It wasn't until a royal decree in 1875 by King Alfonso XII which started an initiative for the planning and construction of railroads in the Philippines. One of which was the creation of an extensive tram network throughout Manila and surrounding areas. A proposal was submitted to Madrid in 1878 by Léon Monsieur, a French resident working for Spain's Department of Public Works. He drew inspiration from the transit systems in New York and Paris and suggested a hub-and-spoke network consisting of 5 tram lines. The plan included a central station situated outside Intramuros at Plaza San Gabriel, now known as Plaza Cervantes, with 4 lines ending in Malate, Malacañang, Sampaloc, Tondo, and a loop line within Intramuros. Although the colonial government supported his proposal, the project was put on hold as there were no entrepreneurs or financiers to fund it. It was waiting for prospective backers to take interest. But around the 1880s, then came Don Jacobo Thobeli Thangronith, who got back from a 5-year stay in Europe, studying the continent's various tram and railway systems, which was then in full swing. With this business acumen and connections, he was awarded 2 60-year concessions by the government to build and operate the tram network, one in April 22 to 1881 for the 5 lines from the Monceau Plan, and another in 1884 for the establishment of 2 additional lines, a main line going to Malabon and a branch line heading straight to the banks of the Pasig River. Subsequently, the Compañía de Tranvias de Filipinas was established on March 10, 1882 by Don Jacobo and engineer Luciano Bremon y Cabello, funded by bankers who were the richest Filipinos of the period, such as Don Pedro Rojas and Don Gonzalo Tuazon, and also a banker from Madrid named Don Adolfo Bayo. The Tranvia will consist of 7 lines labeled A to G, and all are linked to the transit hub in Plaza Cervantes that will connect to the different parts of the city. Okay, I just want to have a quick side note that I'll be using the current names of the streets and plazas of the city, because even though knowing about their old names adds to the learning experience, such as Recto Avenue, once called Paseo de Azcaraga, it will be very confusing for viewers, especially those who aren't familiar with Manila and its streets. Okay, back to the video. Line A, or the Intramuros line, is a loop line that will go inside the walled city via Puerta de Isabel II, passing through various streets such as Beaterio, Cabildo, General Luna, Victoria, Solana, and Real streets before exiting through the Puerta de Parian. Line B, or the Malate line, will go towards the current locations of the Philippine Post Office, Arroceros Park, and Central Station before turning towards Malate Church via Padre Burgos Avenue and Del Pilar Street. The Intramuros and Malate lines will cross the Puente de España to reach the central hub in Plaza Cervantes. Line C, or the Sampaloc line, will go through the old financial district of Escolta, then Plaza Lacson, Carriedo, Plaza Miranda in front of Quiapo Church, Hidalgo and Legarda streets, before ending near what is now Arellano University. Line D, or the Malacañang line, will also go through Escolta and Plaza Lacson, but will head towards Carlos Palanca, General Solano, and Jose Laurel streets, before heading towards the Malacañang Palace. Line E, or the Tondo line, will head towards Binondo Church, passing through San Fernando, Madrid, Lavisares, and Santo Cristo streets, until reaching Recto Avenue, turning towards Carmen Planas and Lacandula streets, until finally reaching its terminus in Soliman Street. Line F, or the Malabon line, is the longest of 7 lines, which starts at Moriones Street and going through Nicretil Bridge and passing through Juan Luna and A. Mabini streets, P. Aquino Avenue, before terminating at San Bartolome's Church. Line G, or the Murayon branch line, will pass through Del Pan Street before reaching the banks of the Pasig River. But along the way, the network was redesigned, especially the Intramuros, Tondo, and Malate lines. The original entry point of the Intramuros line has been rerouted and now runs alongside the northernmost edges of the wall beside what is now the Aduana building. The loop line has also been rerouted and now only passes through Soriano Avenue, Postigo Street, and almost the entirety of Cabildo and General Luna streets. Additionally, the original exit point of the line, which was Puerta de Barayan, has been rerouted to the gate of Intramuros, connecting it to the Malate line. The Tondo and Malabon lines underwent rerouting as well. The Tondo line, which originally had a double track in Lavisari Street, was split into 2 single-track lines that run along Marcelino de Santos and Clavel streets. This allowed the Tondo line to extend to the Malabon line's previous terminus in Moriones Street. Unfortunately, the Malacañang and Murayon lines weren't built, reducing the number of networks to just 5. And the original transit hub in Plaza Cervantes didn't come into fruition. It was instead replaced by a central station in Plaza Goiti, now Plaza Lacson. The Tranvia was finished in multiple phases, beginning with the completion of the Tondo line in 1883, followed by the Intramuros line in 1886, the Sampaloc line in 1887, the Malabon line in 1888, and lastly the Malate line in 1889, the year where the entire network began full operations. Interestingly, the Malabon line predated the Manila-Dagupan railway line, which is part of PNR's North Rail, by about 4 years, making it the first steam railway in the Philippines. Being the longest of the 5 lines, the Malabon line utilized 4 steam-powered tram engines, or Tranvia de Vapor. These tram engines were manufactured in Elbing, now in modern-day Poland, while the coaches that it pulled were built in Loughborough, England. The other lines utilized horse cars, or the delightfully named Tranvia de Sangre, made by the J.G. Brill Company in Philadelphia. The Malabon line's somewhat special treatment was due to its economic importance, as Malabon houses various industries such as fishing, tobacco, and sugar. In accordance with the bi-directional traffic during its time, the network ran on the left side of the road, which is contrary to the current traffic system in the Philippines. As the years passed, more lines were soon built, including the previously cancelled Malacanang line and additional lines in the Zamora Street for the Malabon line. Moreover, there were plans by La Compañía for expanding the network through the construction of additional lines. 2 extensions were proposed for the Malabon line, one leading to Navotas and the other to La Princesa Tabacalera, which was located in what is now Malabon National High School in Barangay Hulong Dagat. The Sampaloc line was also slated for extension to Pasig, Cainta, Taytay, and ultimately Angono. Similarly, the Malate line was planned to run through Pasay and Parañaque before terminating in Kawit in Cavite. Finally, there was a proposal for a new tramway line from a power station in Binondo to Santa Ana, which would be powered by tram engines, similar to those used on the Malabon line. Of these, only portions of the Cavite and Santa Ana extensions came to fruition decades later, with the former reaching as far as the intersection between F.B. Harrison Street and A.S. Arnaiz Avenue, almost behind the DFA main office, and the latter connecting to the Malate line. The Tranvia was a highly successful mode of transportation within the city, offering a cheap, safe, and convenient option for commuters, especially for the residential or NIPA districts of Tondo, Santa Cruz, Sampaloc, and Malate. In fact, it was more profitable than wheel traffic and contributed greatly to the transportation of goods from Malabon and Navotas. In the end, the Tranvia offered a practical and convenient transportation option for the residents within and the outskirts of the capital, leading to the development of what will become Metro Manila. When compared to the cost of renting private carriages and the difficulties of traveling during the rainy season, it was by far the most desirable method of transportation. Despite its apparent success, the Tranvia was not without its problems. According to the company's secretary, there were a variety of issues that needed to be addressed. For instance, there was confusion on how to properly identify the horses for registration purposes and which horses were more efficient in pulling the coaches, those fed on peanuts, corn, or rice. Additionally, the signaling system frequently caused confusion, whether from mishandling the animals, the tram failing to stop, or the whistle of the Guardia Civil being mistaken for a signal. The horse-drawn carriages can only accommodate up to 20 people at most, with 12 people sitting and 8 people standing, which becomes increasingly inadequate as the population of the city grows every year. As a foreign visitor noted, it was not uncommon for passengers to get off and help the vehicle over difficulties, with the driver often using the whip incorrectly and inflicting pain on the horses. While some improvements were made, such as replacing the tram whistle with horns or trumpets to avoid confusion from a Guardia Civil whistle, and passing a law that made it illegal to place obstacles on the tram path, the system's decline continued. At the start of the 1900s, La Compañía had stopped expanding or improving its system, and only 10 streetcars transited the 5 lines daily. City officials blamed the horse car system for slow economic growth and population congestion, and they called for improved transport options. It has been suggested that the lack of progress was due in part to a larger event that was happening at the time, which is the 1896 Philippine Revolution by the Katipunan. It's quite possible that Katipuneros such as Andres Bonifacio took the tram to take part in the now famous cry somewhere in what is now Quezon City or Caloocan. As the Spanish colonial government and Filipino revolutionaries battled it out, a ship of the United States Navy suddenly blew up on the shores of Cuba, claiming that the Spanish did it, which forced the Americans to declare war upon them. After the decisive victory at the Battle of Manila Bay, the Spanish soon sold the Philippines to the Americans in 1899, which was a dilemma for the revolutionaries as they recently declared their independence, albeit unrecognized. This soon led to the eruption of hostilities between the Americans and the Filipinos, ultimately resulting in the Philippine-American War. The Americans took control of the entire city of Manila, including the operations of the Tranvia network. They exclusively used the Malabon line until 1904, humorously nicknaming it the Kansas and Utah Short Line. 2 of the line's rolling stock were eventually sold to the Insular Lumber Company, located in what's now Barangay Fabrica in Sagay, Negros Occidental. On the 21st of October 1902, the Philippine Commission, led by William Taft, passed Act No. 484, which paved the way for franchises to be granted to those who wish to construct and operate Manila's Tranvia network, as well as to manage the city's electricity. Despite the law being publicized in newspapers in the Philippines and America, as well as in a major US railway journal, only one bid was received, from an entrepreneur from Detroit named Charles M. Swift. Eventually, on the 24th of March 1903, the Municipal Board of Manila approved his bid by virtue of Ordinance No. 44. Shortly after the passing of the ordinance, a company was incorporated in New Jersey, which eventually became the Manila Electric Railroad and Light Company, or Meralco. They soon acquired La Compañía and a local electric company named La Electricista the following year, who then hired J.G. White and Company from New York to oversee the network's electrification. The Tranvia network utilized an overhead electrification method with a maximum voltage of 500 volts, which was powered by a steam-powered plant located on an island in Paco, Manila, alongside a new tram depot located near in what is now Adamson University. This power plant would later become known as the Manila Thermal Power Plant, or MTPP. Under pressure from the ordinance that mandated the construction of new lines, Meralco had to swiftly complete their construction, eventually destroying sections of the Intramuros walls to permit passage. One such line was the connection between the Malate line and the Malacañang line after the building of Santa Cruz Bridge. To replace the old rolling stock, Meralco purchased convertible streetcars from the same provider, the J.G. Brill Company. Soon, the Meralco-owned Tranvia was officially inaugurated on April 10, 1905, and a year later, Swift was granted another franchise for the Manila Suburban Railway. They would soon merge with Meralco to form the Manila Electric Company, its current name, where the Tranvia will be operated by native Filipinos. By 1913, Meralco had completed the new lines, and an extension line was built under Swift's other franchise from Santa Ana to Pasig, traversing along Fort McKinley, now BGC or Bonifacio Global City. A branch line was planned from Fort McKinley to Taguig proper and near Laguna Lake in what is now Camp Bagong Diwa, but this didn't come to fruition. Even with the collapse of Puente de España in 1914 due to flooding, it didn't stop the network being reconnected again with the construction of Jones Bridge in 1920. Dr. Leonardo Q. Leongson, observed in a paper he presented that the three principal Tranvia lines led directly to outlying cockpits in suburban La Loma, San Juan, and Makati, which were popular venues for cockfighting. It's worth noting that another tram network was being built in an unlikely location, on the island of Corregidor. The construction of the Corregidor tram network was authorized by US Congress in 1907 with a narrower gauge than the one used in Manila. Initially, the network used tram engines similar to those of the Malabon line, but they were eventually replaced with electric power in 1909 with a voltage of around 600 volts. This network served not only the residents of the island, but also the US military, which used it to transport men and materials within the island's fortifications for the defense of Manila Bay. The total length of the network was more than 5.5 kilometers, and although Meralco provided assistance in addressing any issues, it was the US Army's Quartermaster Corps that was responsible for the railway, in which the soldiers stationed on the island also serve as the railroad's workforce. Going back to the mainland, the population of Manila keeps increasing each decade, and by the 1930s, it had increased by more than 500,000 due to the influx of laborers from other provinces. During this time, the services offered by Meralco were considered inadequate, and there were several complaints against the company, such as overcrowding and unregulated fare rates. To tackle these challenges, a comprehensive reconstruction plan was launched across the network, leading to an expansion of modern streetcars in operation, which ultimately reached a peak fleet size of 170 by 1924. This project marked one of the most significant private capital investments in the country's history, showcasing the investors' strong confidence in the future of the Philippines. To this day, no other transit network in the country has matched the extensive reach of the Tranvia. By the 1930s, it had become one of the most extensive tram networks in Asia, with at least 100 kilometers of track, almost on par to the tram networks in larger and more densely populated cities like Hong Kong and Tokyo at the time. The Tranvia carried approximately 10.5 million passengers in 1906, and by 1925, this number had increased to around 37.8 million. Unfortunately, despite its success, the Tranvia's reign did not last forever. The Great Depression had a significant impact on the Meralco network, resulting in the defunding of most of its services. Private transit companies began to emerge and compete directly with Meralco. To maintain their transit monopoly, Meralco pursued legal action against its competitors, but it eventually had to innovate by introducing new rolling stock such as trolley buses and autobuses. These replacements were introduced mainly because the city's road network improved in the 1930s, and the Tranvia was deemed not economically viable, as the earnings of Meralco's electric department surpassed those of transportation, roughly 20%, with 10% for autobuses and 10% for railways, as compared to electricity distribution at around 80%. By the time the Second World War broke out in the Philippines in 1941, the streetcar fleet had been reduced to 109, while the bus fleet had been expanded to 190. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, the Corregidor tram network was repurposed to transport large amounts of supplies from the hospital to Malinta Tunnel using electric freight motors within a 2-week period. However, on the 29th of December, the island was heavily bombarded, causing severe damage to the network. Some bombs were able to damage the railway, and the war's intensity worsened the deterioration of the tracks. Despite limited attempts to continue operations, these were eventually halted, and the Americans utilized the damaged railroad tracks as reinforcements for concrete barriers. The trolley cars and engines were eventually scrapped during the war, particularly in 1942, when the Japanese captured the island. During the occupation, the Japanese attempted to operate the Tranvia in Manila via the Taiwan Electric Company, but some Filipinos were unwilling to ride them as they were now considered enemy property. Meanwhile, in Corregidor, attempts to restore the tram network were unsuccessful, although a portion of the tracks was fixed from bottom side to Morrison Hill. The rails were salvaged and sent to Japan as scrap, with prisoners of war serving as the workers tasked with hauling the heavy materials. The Battle of Manila in February 1945 dealt a devastating blow to the Tranvia, which was already in a state of disrepair. Most of the rolling stock was destroyed, with some reportedly used as tank barriers in Luneta. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was once stationed in the Philippines before the war, observed that the city was the second most destroyed after Warsaw in Poland. After the war, the Tranvia was beyond repair, and the streetcar system that once dominated Manila was destroyed. The tracks were dismantled, and the remaining fleet was scrapped. Meralco concentrated on restoring electricity to the city and has since been the sole electricity provider for Metro Manila and nearby provinces. As the demand for public transportation grew, a new vehicle emerged from the ashes of war. It is known today as the jeepney. The jeepney was created by refurbishing Willys MB and Ford GPW Jeeps that were previously used by the US military, as they were produced in large numbers. Initially called autocalesas or ACs, the jeepney has continued to serve many areas of the city and has become an unofficial national symbol of Filipino culture and ingenuity, for better or for worse. Although one may consider the jeepney as the eventual successor to the Tranvia due to their overlapping routes, this undermines the integrated nature of the network, which was owned by a single company. In contrast, the jeepney is too decentralized and mostly outdated, being operated by individuals and groups like cooperatives. A more suitable candidate for the successor of the Tranvia would be the LRT, owned by the Light Rail Transit Authority under the country's Department of Transportation. Some sections of the LRT run parallel to the old Tranvia network, such as between Carriedo to Blumentritt stations for LRT-1 and between Recto to Pureza stations for LRT-2. However, the current LRT network is minuscule compared to the vastness of the Tranvia, which stretched all the way from BGC to Malabon proper. Returning to the previous question of whether any remnants of the Tranvia still exist, current research shows that most, if not all remnants, are now buried beneath Manila's concrete paved roads. Some recent photos and accounts from residents and rail fans indicate that rail girders were seen in some streets where the Tranvia once ran, but most were removed when the roads were paved. A replica of the tram is on display at the Meralco Museum in Ortigas, and in some occasions, being shown in their annual Liwanag Park every Christmas season. Some Tranvias can still be seen in Intramuros and Corregidor. However, these refurbished wheeled vehicles are primarily for tourist purposes and do not operate in the same manner as the Tranvia of the past. One notable exception of sorts is the one in Las Casas, Filipinas de Acozar, which operates on rails, although it's shorter than the one used before. Most of the companies connected to Tranvia, such as J.J. Brill and J.J. White companies, are long gone, with the former acquired by General Electric in the 1950s. Charles Swift already sold most of his railroad interests after retiring in 1925 and died 4 years later in 1929, almost avoiding a Wall Street crash. His documents and other belongings are now being kept in the Henry Sheldon Museum in Vermont. Don Jacobo Zobel, who was implicated in the revolution, died of a heat stroke in 1896, but his descendants went on to run one of the largest conglomerates in the Philippines, the Ayala Corporation. Perhaps one of the most overlooked legacies of the Tranvia is the orange color of Meralco's logo, a tribute to the orange livery of some trams that once traversed Manila's streets. While the Tranvia is now a distant relic in Filipino history that can only be seen in old photographs and movies like The Great Raid, one can still experience what it's like to ride a tram overseas. Tram engines are still operating in France, Germany, and Switzerland as heritage trains, and one of the most beloved characters in Thomas and Friends is a tram engine named Toby. Horse cars are also being used as heritage trains in Austria, Australia, Japan, Germany, and the United States. Trams manufactured by J.G. Brill are still in operation in Portugal, particularly in Lisbon and Porto, where both original units and locally made copies continue to run to this day, likely the last surviving cousins of the Tranvia. At present, the Tranvia remains a fading recollection in the annals of Filipino history, and the fate of its revival rests solely on the collective will of Filipinos to elevate their public transportation system for generations to come. If you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to stay updated. You can also support the channel on Patreon or donate via Gcash or Ko-fi, as it helps the channel in creating more educational content like this. And with that out of the way, thank you very much for watching, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.